I'm just kind of at a loss for words at this point. Penn State is the only major program without a head coach. This process has become an absolute joke.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That is right. You are locked on to this Penn State football coaching search, for better or for worse. My name is Zach Sako. I'm the host of Locked On Nittany Lions, as always. Thank you so much for joining me here on this live reaction. I'll be honest, no notes, because I want to do this genuinely, transparently, as Penn State is still without a head coach. We're going to dive into so many different things, between them missing on Kalani Sitake of BYU. I'm not even sure what Pat Kraft's plan is at this point in time, where they're going to go. There's still candidates out there. The players are clearly they still want Terry Smith to be the guy. Is that even a possibility? So we're going to weigh all of that, plus get into the live chat, hear from all of you. So again, thank you so much for joining me on this live show. So let's begin with the Kalani Sitake news, as Sitake is going to stay at BYU. Is anybody surprised by that? Seriously, is anybody surprised that the guy that is BYU through and through, that played there, that graduated from there, that has coached there for the past decade, he's beloved by BYU. His faith, his values have all been inspired by BYU and what the institution stands for. It's all he's really known. It's all his family's really known. And this is where Penn State and Pat Kraft pushed all their chips into the middle of the table and said, we got our guy. We got him. Look, I think Kalani Sitake is a great coach. I think he's a great person. I didn't really see the fit whatsoever. And even though all this, and I've seen this go. I've seen this go too many times, and I've been on the other side of it, where it was pick anybody. Honestly, pick a coaching candidate at this point in time that Penn State was in contact with, had a strong connection, and things were trending in that way, and the market odds said what they said. Whether it was Mike Elko or Kalen DeBoer, or just honestly name anybody at this point. And then it goes completely south in the final minutes, right? So that was my expectation. I'm like, okay, let me flip this over, because I've been on the other side of it, where I'm fully expecting Penn State to get this. They got their guy. This is the reason that they fired James Franklin. This is going to elevate the program. And not for one second did I think that Sitake was going to be Penn State's head coach. I don't care what the intel said. I don't care what the message board said, because this keeps happening. It keeps happening to where Penn State is in line, or at least gaining momentum, to get a head coaching candidate, as realistic or as unrealistic as it seems. And something happens. They get an extension. They put something to the opposing school, puts something together and keeps that candidate, or it just doesn't. Penn State just doesn't get a lucky break, right? You were banking on the fact that USC would push out Lincoln Riley. You were banking on the fact that Alabama would push out Kalen DeBoer. Did anybody really think that BYU wasn't going to rally to try to keep Sitake? And apparently, Penn State was anticipating that. Pat Kraft was anticipating that. So I'm not really sure that anybody should be surprised. Pat Kraft shouldn't be surprised whatsoever. I never thought Sitake was going to be Penn State's next head football coach. And I didn't really see somebody with all of his roots in BYU. He was anchored down in BYU completely. It's not like he has any other connections to any part of the country outside of the state of Utah, right? And I mean that I'm over exaggerating, of course. But this guy has been anchored in Utah and at BYU for the longest time. And he's supposed to just scrap that and go to Penn State for what exactly? when there are question marks about how is he going to be received by the fans. And I'm not trying to criticize the Penn State fan base, but that is an outside concern. And I understand that when James Franklin, even though some people will say, well, James Franklin deserved it. Okay, I understand. But how is that being perceived by a prospective head coach that has no connections to Penn State? That I have to come in and win right away. I get 2 seasons, 3 seasons to improve on what the last guy did, or at least get there. So what's really intriguing is that it seems like Pat Kraft and Penn State this was their plan, to go and blindside BYU and bank on the fact, well, they're not going to be able to match our resources because right now they're so far behind, which is objectively true. BYU was paying Sitake allegedly somewhere. If you do a quick Google search, it says $3 million. Some people were reporting in the neighborhood of $5 to $7 million. Okay, well, Penn State's significantly increasing that to 10, maybe even 11 million. And they're going to give the assistants, and they're going to allow Sitake complete control in what he's allowed to do with how he constructs the program. I see the vision. I see what Penn State's trying to sell Sitake. It's no wonder he was interested. But I default back to, you were banking on a guy that only knows BYU football and if he did that, if he actually made this move, he would have annihilated everything that he had built. I don't think the BYU community would have ever let him, because is it worth taking a chance at Penn State? I'm asking from Sitake's perspective, because if Sitake failed or didn't live up to expectations, let's say he wins, but he doesn't win enough, and then you can't go back to your home. Not quite sure that was worth the risk, the gamble. So now everybody's making a joke out of it. We are to the point where the people were right that Penn State was going to regret firing James Franklin. At least that's how it looks in the present. It's still to be determined, because we don't know who the head coach is going to be. We don't know how the next 5 to 10 years are going to be. College football college athletics are so fluid that you can be bad today and be great tomorrow. Ask Texas Tech, right? What the transfer portal can do for you. So I am not willing to sit here and say that, oh, Penn State's doomed for the next 3, 5, 10 years. This is it. This is the curse of firing James Franklin. But it does look bad. I mean, the optics look terrible. People are calling for Pat Kraft's job, both inside and outside, right, of the Penn State circles, right? Vocal fans, people that are clearly disgruntled, of course, at the end of the day. And I can reason with that, because this is not how it was supposed to go. The class of 2026, my thoughts there on that, the class of 2026 is not the end-all be-all. Losing Sitake is also not the end-all be-all. It's just embarrassing. It just makes it look like a joke. And I have to see if Penn State's going to hedge this in any sort of way. If you went all in with Sitake, I don't care that you had a handshake. You had to have known that BYU was going to rally in some capacity, and they did. You didn't just go up against BYU. You went up against an entire religion. You went up against the Church of Latter-day Saints, where they take care of their own. Some things are just bigger than football. And this was the mystery candidate. Sitake was the mystery candidate. And it's good on Pat Kraft that he kept this under wraps for so long, but hindsight's 2020. I don't know that it was worth it. I kind of wish that this did get leaked out in a way, that this information had gotten back to BYU sooner, so that it didn't get to this point, because now Penn State is scrambling. And does Jeff Brohm want this job now? Who else would want it, right? Bob Chesney's off to UCLA. You missed other candidates that you could have, I don't like to say this, but you could have settled for other solid candidates, but instead you were hyper-focused on Sitake. That is a gross miscalculation. It was a terrible miscalculation at this point in time. So let's talk about Pat Kraft in the next segment, plus what other candidates are still out there, because Penn State, in theory, can salvage this coaching search. Like I said, Sitake wasn't the only candidate. Brian Hartline's still out there. Terry Smith is just the floor above. As Tony Rojas has clearly pointed out on social media, that the guy is sitting right above me right now. We'll talk about that and more coming up next here on this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. If you're looking for a great holiday gift, you got to go with Omaha Steaks, because the holidays always feel a little easier when you already know the perfect gift. And Omaha Steaks, they make it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to friends and family, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to your door. And this week is the best time to jump in, because their cyber sale is here, and the deals, they are massive. I've been given an Omaha Steaks gift package before, and it's one of my favorite gifts to receive during the holiday season. It's the quality. It's exactly what you hope for. Incredibly tender steaks, rich flavor, and meals that make hosting or weeknight cooking easier. And the variety, it's underrated. Steaks, burgers, comfort meals, sides, desserts. It's one of those gifts that truly fits for anyone. And honestly, it's the kind of gift that brings people together. So save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale. And for an additional $35 off, use promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That is promo code COLLEGE over at omahasteaks.com. Promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See site for details. Okay, we're going to talk about other candidates and evaluate Pat Kraft at this point in time. Pat Kraft was in a situation where it was you're darned if you do, darned if you don't. At the end of the day, I stand by the fact that I don't believe that he went rogue and fired James Franklin. Right, the fans booed him in and out of the stadium. James Franklin, that is. The powers that be at Penn State really weren't giving confidence to James Franklin. And for what it's worth, James Franklin wanted out of Penn State. So Pat Kraft did make his bed. Now he has to lay in it, but I also don't think he was dealt the best hand in this situation. So I'll get to that. I'm not as critical of Pat Kraft, but we are starting to get into what's the euphemism here that I'm trying to think of. DEFCON. We're not exactly at DEFCON 5, but we're starting to trend in that direction, because you compromise the recruiting class, the optics look bad, and you missed on other candidates. Will Stein lands at Kentucky. Don't tell me that he's not ready to be a head coach at a major power program. Don't tell me that. And Kentucky's not the same guy. It's still the SEC. So I do want to check in the comment section, because holy wow, lot of comments here. People are frustrated, right? Questioning what's going on. So I do want to just get to the live chat, the people that jumped in here first. Zach, you crack me up every single time, buddy. Hire Billy Napier. I think he'd be good for you guys. Stop it. Now's not the time for jokes. Please, this is a serious situation. Don't do that. Do you want all of this to stop, Pat? Make the word interim say full-time. Okay. That's how you get this to stop, is you promote Terry Smith, right? We're going to evaluate other candidates here. What Penn State doesn't get is no one wants to coach there anymore. I mean, it's like, why leave Indiana for Penn State? What do they have that Indiana does not? The answer now is nothing. People have made a good, there's been multiple people that say that the resources, other institutions have resources that Penn State just can't. And that's what it felt like through this whole situation with BYU, is that Penn State was just financially bullying BYU. And you could, I mean, to go from, okay, let's say it's in the middle. Sitake was getting his salary doubled. $5 million allegedly at BYU, because they're a private institution. They don't have to report their actual contract numbers. $5 million to Sitake would have been, reportedly, the rumor was $10 to $11 million, doubled at Penn State, plus more guarantees for his assistants. And he would be able to craft his entire coaching staff. And I don't mean that as a pun. He would have total control over his coaching staff. because at BYU, you are limited. You don't go to BYU unless there is your element of your faith and your beliefs. There aren't those restrictions at Penn State. So I can understand why Sitake would have, and okay, I'm just going to throw it out there because again, we're in the situation. Do we know at the end of the day if Sitake was truly interested? I imagine because he's an honorable man and he gave the handshake, but I just want to throw it out there just to kind of take the opposite angle of it, because now we're at a point in time where every single prominent candidate, whether they actually interviewed for the job or not, because Eli Drinkwitz, for example, said he was never connected to the Penn State job remotely, and he actually, and then he gets a massive extension from Missouri. Every prominent coach got a raise, got more guarantees, stability, more benefits for their staff. They have used, so I'm tired of saying the joke that, oh, send a thank you card and a gift basket to Pat Kraft, but that's where we are at this point, is every coaching candidate just using Penn State for leverage? That here's the contract offer I just got from Penn State, or here are the numbers that my agents heard from Penn State. Oh, we'll match it, or we'll get close, right? I think BYU is going to get close. I don't think they're going to actually match it, but they're going to get close. And then why would Sitake leave at that point? So, all right. So it brings me back to Pat Kraft. Again, we got to talk about so many different things. And I want to talk about Brian Hartline, Terry Smith, whomever else is out there. Are you a coaching candidate? Would you like to apply to be Penn State's head football coach? Pat Kraft, I'm not going to be as harsh, because overall, Pat Kraft has elevated Penn State athletics, but your top priority is football at the end of the day. So, I mean, wrestling's always been as good as it is, as great, as elite as it is, but it even got better, okay? He's helped elevate so many other sports teams. And I know that's not going to matter to people when we're talking about the number one sport, the number one priority, football, and the optics of this situation. Again, Penn State is the only major program without a head coach right now. I know there are other programs that are still looking, but I'm talking SEC, Big Ten, right? The big name programs. Penn State is the only one without a head coach. And part of Pat Kraft's job is managing expectations, is managing the public relations of this all of this, however you want to say it, right? So did he mess up big time? I mean, presently, yes. Can this be salvaged? Yes. You can still go that, and that's why this is a perfect segue into our next topic, is you can still get other good to great caliber coaching candidates. Even though Bob Chesney's off the board, right? Even though I think Will Stein would have been a great coaching candidate, but all allegedly, according to Football Scoop, is that Penn State was not impressed. And they said that the description was Will Stein was a little bit too raw. Okay, well, that's a little bit frustrating. So maybe this goes from bad to worse here, because was Dan Lanning raw? Was he a raw candidate? Was Marcus Freeman a raw candidate? Kirby Smart? Were they not ready? Because do you notice how that Ryan Day, once upon a time, was a coordinator, an assistant coach, no head coaching experience, and promoted after Urban Meyer? Who would you say are the top 4 programs right now, objectively, in all of college football, in terms of direction, in terms of on-field results presently, where they are presently combined with their outlook for the next 5 years? All of them have first-time head coaches as their head coach. Georgia, Kirby Smart. Marcus Freeman in Notre Dame. Ryan Day in Ohio State. And Dan Lanning in Oregon. It is okay to go with a coordinator. Brian Hartline is still there, but the word around town is Penn State doesn't think he's that ideal of a candidate. Okay. Why? Why? Because he's never been a head coach. He still brings with him the respect, the notoriety, the cachet, and it's not like he's coming from a small school. He's been at Ohio State for the longest time. And that is the concern. The only concern that I have with Brian Hartline is that eventually he would go back to Ohio State and be the Buckeyes head coach in the future. I mean, who knows? Maybe he finds his home at Penn State and says, "Okay, this is where I'm going to say." It's predicated on, what does Ryan Day do? I can't predict that in 5 years. Does he eventually go off to the NFL? Does he retire? Right? Brian Hartline is still a good candidate and probably someone that I would have put above Sitake. Terry Smith. Terry Smith, the player. Here are the conditions for Terry Smith, though. You can go with Terry Smith, but so long as he keeps most of the roster intact, you're still going to have people that leave via the transfer portal. It's going to happen. But if he's able to keep Tony Rojas, Amari Campbell, name anybody, Ethan Grunkemeyer, Kobe Howard, 5-star players. What if he's able to keep, and we're not going to know that truly unless the move is made, right? We'll find out. But maybe that's the reservation that I have here is, why hasn't Terry Smith been made the head coach? Is it strictly because you don't fire James Franklin to hire Terry Smith? I get that. But is it also because, well, I might assume, based on what Anthony Donko says to a TV camera after an emphatic win over Nebraska, or what Tony Rojas says on social media, or King Mac, are they just saying that because they respect Terry Smith and they want him to get the job? Or is that because this team's going to rally around him for next season and most of them are going to stay, especially the key players? So Terry Smith can be the head coach and should be the head coach at this point in time because he is Penn State through and through. Look at how BYU went to support Kalani Sitake. I kind of like the idea of that. I kind of like the idea of the Penn State community being able to rally around somebody that is Penn State through and through. Terry Smith is Mr. Penn State. He's made that very clear. But it's also, you are setting him up for failure if you don't keep this roster intact for the most part. And same thing with the coaching staff. You will lose probably, and I don't know that many people will take a break here, but I don't know that many people would be concerned about Danny O'Brien or Marcus Hagans or Phil Troutwine or even Andy Kotelnicki. But Andy Kotelnicki and Jim Knowles were starting to do better as the season progressed under Terry Smith's direction. Okay, with Jim Knowles and Rutgers, that's different, separate conversation. One game doesn't define everything, but they started to put it together, and you would have year 2 of a Jim Knowles defense, and you would keep, this roster's talented. This coaching staff is pretty darn good. But if you're only going to keep half of it, a quarter of it, then Terry Smith can't be the head coach because you would be setting him up for failure at that point. So I go to advocate for Terry Smith as a head coaching candidate because I think that if you're able to keep 75, 80% of the roster and then go fill in the gaps through the transfer portal, in theory, you could actually go and get some of those 2026 recruits to transfer in. Yes, they would. Julian Sand did this at Ohio State, where he was committed to Alabama. He signed with the 2024 class or 2025 class, whichever it was. And then he transferred after he had signed to Ohio State. There's no 2026 class because no one knows who the head coach is. I'm pretty sure there are a number of players that would play and want to commit to Terry Smith if they knew he was going to be the head coach for not just one season, for 2, 3, right? He gets an actual agreement in place. There's still Jeff Brohm out there. There's Brian Daboll. There are other candidates that Penn State can salvage this entire situation with, and we'll discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, NFL Sundays move fast, and one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. And with FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is the best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into that moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys continue to heat up. And you can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. And you can bet on your favorite NFL teams. Lines are available for the Steelers and the Eagles this weekend. The Steelers are 5.5-point underdogs plus 235 on the money line against the Baltimore Ravens. The total is set at 43.5. The Eagles are slight favorites against the Los Angeles Chargers this weekend. 3-point favorites on the road. The total, that's a low total, 40.5 points between the Eagles and the Chargers, minus 154 on the money line for Philadelphia. If you like those lines, you can bet them over at FanDuel.com and the FanDuel app. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. All right, what other candidates are out there? Actually, plenty. People are saying, hey, make a play for Bob Chesney at this point. Nothing is officially signed. You can go push for him. I'm not opposed to it. I'm not against it. But then there are other people that are just countering and saying, no, Bob Chesney is done. Let him. He's off to UCLA. I'm pretty sure he wants to stay on the East Coast. The guy is from Coal Belt, Pennsylvania. He's blue collar. I think he would love the Penn State job. He would be a fit. He would appreciate the Penn State job. Again, it felt like with Penn State pursuing Sitake, Sitake was doing it simply for money. He was doing it because it was a job offer that he couldn't turn away. Well, and then no, he could turn it away. So Jeff Brohm's still out there at Louisville. But that's another situation kind of similar to Sitake. It's not to the extent of family. And well, actually it is because, so let me reframe. The situation with Sitake is different because it's different with faith and the Church of Latter-day Saints, right? But there's still that component there with family, friends, legacy. I mean, the Brohm family is well connected with Louisville. The alleged rumor is that, if Penn State makes a formal offer and they're going to be they're easily going to get Brohm away from Louisville. I like Jeff Brohm as a head coaching candidate. I've said that from the beginning because he was one of the first coaching candidates to be linked to Penn State. Inconsistent this season. Louisville was still good, but they weren't great. Does that have to do with resources? Because Jeff Brohm's a really good coach. He's 3-1. He was 3-1 against top 5 teams at Purdue. And to add insult to injury here for us Penn State folks, Jeff Brohm has a more recent victory over Ohio State than Penn State does. 2018. Last time Penn State beat Ohio State was 2016 on a miracle blocked field goal. So Jeff Brohm knows how to win the big game. That quality alone, that skill set alone makes him an ideal candidate because Penn State never won the big game. Never. All the games that Penn State was expected to win, they won under James Franklin. And all of the games they were expected to lose, or the games where it was kind of neutral, right? It's a toss-up. Sure, you default and say, yeah, Penn State is a slight favorite here against a top 5 Iowa team. They're a slight favorite on the road against a Minnesota team or a Michigan State team, but they still lost those games. Every big game that could have put Penn State past the bar, they lost. Well, Jeff Brohm doesn't have that problem. Those teams show up and they fight in the biggest moments. They upset number 2 Miami at Miami this season, and that's still a good Miami team. Miami beat Notre Dame this year. So Jeff Brohm, if you're able to get him away from Louisville, again, it's a situation where it's a job just to have a job. You're going to get a pay raise. You're going to get more staff guarantees. And what what Penn State coaches are you going to keep? Because I think that's a question that needs to be asked. Because you can't just make Penn State into your version of what it was at Louisville. You're going to have to find a way, and I'm not saying it's likely, I'm not even saying it's possible, but if you can, Terry Smith, Deion Barnes, Dan Connor, Ty Howell, I imagine that's why Terry Smith is still so appealing to me, because those coaches would stay on board. And they would probably follow James Franklin to Virginia Tech. Some of them, not all of them, or they'd go find another job. Those are good assistant coaches. It's not just, oh, they went to Penn State, so that's why Zach says they're worthwhile or they're valuable. No, that's not it. Deion Barnes can develop defensive line talent. Dan Connor was one of the rising stars amongst younger, brand new assistant coaches. So Jeff Brohm's a candidate, and that's really what it's down to. That's why I'm not sure what Penn State's backup plan is. Yes, we're going to gather that over the next hours, few days. But it seems like the only names that are realistic at this point are Terry Smith, and I'm not saying this in any particular order, but Terry Smith, Brian Hartline, Jeff Brohm, Brian Daboll, Northeast guy. I know that there are a lot of negative connotations with him because of what he did with the New York Giants. So I understand that. I'm not going to sit here and pound the table for Brian Daboll. But I'm also here to say you don't know what you have until you know for sure. It's not a guarantee that he's going to fizzle out at Penn State. You give him, you allow him to be good at what he's good at. Creating an offense, right? Working with the quarterbacks. I mean, Jackson Dart was on the right trajectory with him there. And then you fill the other gaps in between. It's the same thing with Brian Hartline. Oh, Brian Hartline's just not ready to be a head coach. Okay, so go put the protections and the guardrails in place to make it be a seamless transition. Same thing with Terry Smith. Well, we don't know if Terry Smith can actually lead a major program on a day-to-day basis. So go get the general manager. Go get the necessary assistant coaches or the personnel or whatever you need to make his job easier. It's the same thing with Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll was one of the hottest names on the NFL coaching carousel once upon a time. I just don't think it was a fit. The New York Giants, that is tough. How often do coaches go into New York City and succeed? Because other than Tom Coughlin, and don't even get me started on the Jets, it is not easy to win in New York City. Or I guess, no, I should say the coast, the border of New Jersey, because they don't even play in New York City. But it is difficult for anybody to win right now at New York in the NFL. So I'm not going to let that define Brian Daboll. Other coaches have come back to college football, taken a step down, and they've succeeded. They're not the standard. They're the exception, but Lane Kiffin did that. Nick Saban did that. It can work. Okay? You can go off to the NFL. It doesn't exactly work. And you can come down to college football and settle in and do just fine. I know that he's just a coordinator, but Matt Patricia and that Ohio State defense, they're number one. I know he's got a lot of talent, but everybody made fun of him in the NFL. He's no good. He comes to college football. It's almost too easy for him. We could say that about Chip Kelly as well. Chip Kelly, offensive coordinator at Ohio State, and they end up winning a national title. So I'm not completely against the idea of Brian Daboll being Penn State's head coach, because I think he offers you upside. I've said this about any coaching candidate. You need the upside. And there's so many comments for me to get through. I don't know how I'm going to approach the live chat here because I know the comment section is probably going crazy right now with me even saying anything positive about Brian Daboll. I'm just saying it's not awful. That there is he helped develop Josh Allen. The Bills' offense was humming when he was the OC. He has connections in the Northeast. There is going to be an appeal for quarterbacks, wide receivers, people who want to develop and have an NFL connection. You can start a NFL development program at Penn State in theory with Brian Daboll. So those are the names that I'm really focused on at this point. If somebody else emerges, if somebody else pops up, there are people trying to say that Kalen DeBoer is still an option. No, I'm kind of all those dreams have left, that Penn State's going to be able to poach another coach from a big time program. And it's not that Penn State can't do it, but everyone is secure at their job. So this is what I'll finish up with, because Penn State's still going to be able to get a good coach one way or another. They're not going to get their top targets, because why would Marcus Freeman leave Notre Dame? Why would Kalen DeBoer leave Alabama? Why would Mike Elko leave Texas A&M? Unless things were going wrong. And those programs, they all gave them more money, a raise, better, an extension, something, more staff guarantees. A lot of this has to do with just bad timing. Everybody jumped into this coaching search. Everybody fired their head coach. And Penn State was one of the first ones to do it. Now they're going to be one of the last ones to do it. They're going to be one of the last ones to hire somebody. The first one to fire somebody, last one to hire somebody. I have 1,000 comments to somehow get through. And I'll see if there are any. I'm going to try to read through, because that's my show. That's my spiel. That's my agenda that I have to get through, which is the promise as always. And then we try to dive into the live chat and see if there's anything that, any ideas or questions that we can discuss. Yeah, I agree. Seriously, I'd entertain anyone that would actually like to be here now. Bob Chesney and Terry Smith. And maybe even Brian Hartline. I think Brian Hartline wants to be the head coach at Penn State. The disconnect is that Penn State Pat Kraft doesn't believe that he's ready. Number one trending on, okay, so the Penn State coaching search is trending on social media. Yeah. And how could it not? A cookie company got involved and was able to retain their head coach at their respective alma mater that they support, or their respective program that they support. Jeff Brohm is still an option by proxy. And same thing that I said about Sitake. Are you going to be able to get Brohm away from Louisville when that's his alma mater? Same thing with Brent Key at Georgia Tech. Interesting how difficult it is to poach coaches when it's more than just football that keeps them there. Terry Smith. I see a lot of support for Brian Hartline in here. If it's Hartline, what's the holdup? Hartline, Penn State does not view Hartline as high as maybe it should. Pat Kraft. Would Pat Kraft get fired? Pat Kraft is definitely on the hot seat, because it wasn't supposed to be handled this way. Part of this job is also managing expectations, but he's also done so much more for the athletic department, the athletics overall, that this is a big deal, and it certainly puts him in a much tougher situation. Like it's kind of, you have to ace this coaching hire or that's it. And I'll throw this out there. I would not be surprised if Pat Kraft might just leave on his own. It would not shock me. Now, it is Penn State. Do you just want to walk away from Penn State? Or do you make them fire you? It would not shock me if Pat Kraft might say, I got to find another athletic job. I got to go to another university if there's an opening. Would not shock me. Manny Diaz. No to Manny Diaz for a variety of reasons. Kind of the same thing that, so for one, not recruiting. Manny Diaz is a great defensive coordinator, and he hasn't really impressed me at Duke so far. I think Duke's a great fit for him. He's from Florida, right? He has all the connections in Florida. You're not going to get everybody from Florida to come up to Penn State, even though Penn State did a semi-decent job with that. I don't know where Pat Kraft and Manny Diaz actually stand, because when Kraft was at Temple, tried hiring Diaz as the next head coach, and then Diaz took the Miami, Florida job a day or two later after he was introduced as Temple's head coach. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not entirely sure where the relationship stands. They probably have a good working relationship. I don't know what their personal relationship is. Manny Diaz is still well down the list for me. I he would bring the defensive mindset back, and I think that's what everyone sees. Well, he was a great defensive coordinator, but managing a program is a whole nother step. No to Brian Kelly. Don't say Brian Kelly. Even though I've heard people try to say that Penn State, I had a source reach out to me just asking me, what are you hearing about Brian Kelly and Penn State? Like there was something there, like there was smoke there. I said, nothing. I haven't heard anything about Brian Kelly, and I hope that I wouldn't. Don't do that to me. No, absolutely not to Brian Kelly. But I'm leaving it at that. And that was maybe a month ago. Nah, not a month ago. Maybe a couple weeks ago. So many comments. So many comments. Like I said, appreciate each and every one of you for joining me on this live show. A lot of people frustrated with Pat Kraft. Yes, BYU has, and I know how far. Oh, geez, I'm really far behind. I'm really far behind in the comment section. These were rolling in at I'm at 6:10 p.m. and we're in real time. We're almost to 6:42. So I see that so I'm catching up, and people are, yeah, BYU, the cookie business getting involved. Sitake would have been a disaster hire. It was more likely to fail than succeed. I did not want Sitake for a variety of reasons. I think he's a great coach. I just don't think it would have worked out at Penn State. That had failure written all over it, honestly. Again, unless there's something that we don't know at the end of the day. But Sitake, the idea was that he was going to bring his whole coaching staff with him. You need somebody from the East Coast. Terry Smith, Deion Barnes, Dan Connor, Anthony Poindexter, somebody. You need somebody. So what exactly was the overall vision? Because I'm still trying to come to terms with that. Is that Sitake would have needed some help to bridge that gap in recruiting. He's regionally respected. He's not nationally respected. Pennsylvania recruits, DC, Maryland, Virginia, Ohio, Florida, right? That's where you're recruiting. And not just high school recruiting. The transfer portal's like that too, right? Proximity does matter. If somebody's from that specific area, Amari Campbell's from the state of Virginia. It wasn't a massive jump for him to go to Penn State. But would Sitake be able to get a future player that is in a similar situation like Amari Campbell out of the transfer portal? Probably not. Urban Meyer. They had Urban Meyer, but let him go. I'm not sure what the situation was there anymore. You hear so much I've heard so much conflicting information, because today in the Intel wars, it was, well, Sitake, they had a handshake agreement. He's coming here. And the other side was saying, nope, he's going to stay at BYU. This BYU feels pretty confident where it's at. But they had the handshake agreement. Penn State fully expects that he's going to come here. And then I just had to kind of sit back and say, logically, it doesn't make sense. So I assume that he stays at BYU. I've heard so much conflicting info, so much. Urban Meyer wanted the job. Well, he didn't want the job. Penn State wanted him. No, actually, Penn State didn't want him. And they didn't think he was qualified because he's been out of the coaching game for so long now. And these are credible sources that will go on the record and say one thing or another. That's what's so interesting about this coaching search. I don't want to say anymore that Pat Kraft, deserves credit for keeping this under wraps, because it doesn't matter anymore. I don't care that I don't care that information hasn't been leaked. I don't care because it's not like it's resulted in something great. What did it result in? More embarrassment, more humiliation. So, Penn State and Pat Kraft have done a really good job keeping this coaching search under wraps and keeping it quiet. Doesn't matter. Let it be all public at this point, because you just fell flat on your face with it. Matt Rule, no, I think people, anybody that says Matt Rule, Brian Kelly, any of those guys are just they're just trying to be fun. They're trying to laugh at the misery here. Again, I will say this, it's not the end of the world because there are other coaching candidates out there. If you get Jeff Brohm, okay, that's a good hire. It's not a great hire, it's a good hire. Terry Smith is a good hire. Brian Hartline, he is a good hire because he is a wild card. You don't know how he's going to do. He's never been a head coach before. He's been limited as a play caller. But again, I like how he recruits. I like how he develops NFL talent. I like the connections that he has. All those prospects, he's not going to get 5-star wide receivers and quarterbacks, but he'll get the next best group. It's not going to be Julian Sam and Jeremiah Smith year after year. But what about tier 2, tier 3? That was better, especially at wide receiver. Ethan Grunkemeyer. I hope Penn State keeps around Ethan Grunkemeyer. I am a huge Ethan Grunkemeyer fan. I think I've made that clear over the past few weeks, especially since and I saw it, okay, against Iowa, struggled, but I saw some good things. Let's wait and see. Ohio State, nobody performed well in that game. So I'm not going to be as critical of Grunkemeyer because Ohio State was Ohio State. And then against Indiana, you could argue his best performance overall this season was simply the second half against the number 2 team in the nation. If you don't think Ethan Grunkemeyer can be the starting quarterback at Penn State, I don't know what to tell you. Guy's legit. He's got 3 more years of eligibility. He's only going to improve and get better. Get him a better offensive staff in place that can make him a better quarterback if you need to go in that direction. But right now with Andy Kotelnicki, he's shown so much progress. So Ethan Grunkemeyer, if he wants to stay at Penn State, that's your QB of the future. You can build around Grunkemeyer. Yeah, where does everyone send their resume? Does anybody have Pat Kraft's email handy? How am I going to get through all these comments? Well, I'm not. That's the honest. No, Kraft did not hire Cale Sanderson. Yes, we all know that. But a lot of other sports are in better situations. And when Penn State does have 31 varsity sports, and I know nobody's going to care in the scheme of things, but I'm saying I don't know how other people feel in the powers that be at Penn State, where men's hockey's in a better situation, women's hockey's in a better situation, wrestling is in a better situation. Even though they've already dominated the sport, they're dominating it more. Okay. So Kraft has improved men's soccer, women's soccer. And I know people are saying you will clown me in the comments section for saying that. But that's what an athletic director is supposed to do at a place like Penn State University, is that, yeah, football is number 1, first and foremost, but you also manage a whole athletic department. Okay. So Pat Kraft is doing his job well, just not with this coaching search, which is a big deal, which is why his seat is hot. I'm not saying that absolves him of the coaching search. I'm saying that he has to prove it. It can't get worse, because then you do get fired. You don't have a hot seat at all to sit on. You're just out. You're out. People seem split on Terry Smith, and I understand that. I totally understand that. Part of it is a misconception. Let's see. I put out and I know this isn't an accurate representation on social media, an X poll, a Twitter poll. Do you want Terry Smith to be Penn State's next head coach? 60% say yes, 60 and a half, 39 and a half say no. And I know that everybody that is voting is not necessarily a Penn State fan or a Penn State supporter or anybody that cares, right? It's to get an idea of, okay, where do things stand? I'm trying to get a sample, because if this was reversed, if this was 40% say yes, 60% say no, I'd be like, okay, then it seems like we're not on board with Terry Smith as being the next head coach. There isn't any sort of interest here. But the players, the coaches, you got to salvage something. Simply not hiring Terry Smith because of the optics, I don't get it. I really don't. But it is all predicated on the Penn State might know something that we don't. If you don't have the coaches and the players all ready to play for Terry Smith next season, I wouldn't want Terry Smith to be the head coach. I've said that. I'll say it again. I want to reiterate that. It's not just blindly promote Terry Smith and say, you got it, man. Go for it. Good luck. Go into the transfer portal. Try to recruit. No, you would need to keep a majority of this coaching staff and this roster around. So if that's the case, what are we waiting for? But we don't know where things stand. We can only guess. Would everybody stick around? Maybe. And the players are vocal, right? Tony Rojas is vocal. Anthony Donko is vocal. King Mack is vocal. I mean, those are stars. It's not like backup players are saying this. These guys are the faces of the team that are saying, hire Terry Smith. That's a big deal in my mind. Yeah, Greg Schiano. Make Greg Schiano say no. David Braun at Northwestern. Nope. No chance. Hugh Freeze. Again, I don't know if people are being serious. Should I take some of these seriously? Are we just throwing out names just at this point? The coaches that you should be focused on are Brian Hartline, Terry Smith. I would like to say Bob Chesney because he still hasn't allegedly signed anything with UCLA. But I don't know that to be true or to not be true. That's just what people are saying. Bob Chesney really wants the job. It would look bad. I don't know how it would, but Penn State would get a pretty good head coaching candidate with a lot of upside. I know his floor is low, but this is why you made this move, to elevate Penn State with the risk that the floor could bottom out. Brian Hartline does that. Terry Smith, for what it's worth in my mind, does have upside. If you put the other protections in place to help him. I think Terry Smith can be a guy that is motivated beyond dollars and cents. There's a lot of value in that. Clearly. Look at BYU. Somebody that is motivated beyond a paycheck, wants to just go scrap just for the sake of it. That would help Penn State. And you have the war chest. Penn State's still Penn State. Penn State's still in the Big Ten. It's a reputable institution. People are going to want to play at Penn State. But you got to create the situation to set it up. Starting to catch up on the comment section. So we're kind of running out of answers at this point. I see Al Golden in there. To comment on Al Golden, if Golden was still at Notre Dame, I think he'd be the head coach right now. I'm not saying that I approve of it. I'm not saying that I co-sign it. But if he was still the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame right now, he'd either be a leading candidate or the head coach at this point in time. Because Penn State is not going to hire Al Golden after, what the Bengals have done this season. They have one of the worst defenses, if not the worst. I'm not following the NFL analytics on a day-to-day basis. I'm too caught up in this, right? I'm pretty busy with this. This is a lot of fun. I enjoy this. But Al Golden and the Bengals defense, they are garbage. But let's not forget that He also coached a top 5 Notre Dame defense to the college football playoff championship a season ago, and Penn State grad, Penn State alum. So Golden would make a ton of sense if the timeline was different. And again, I'm not saying that I fully approve of that. I'm just saying, hey, let's be honest here. The objective truth is that Golden, if he was still at Notre Dame, just ironic how it all works out at the end of the day. If he's still the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame, he's probably Penn State's next head coach as we're sitting right now in the present, if that timeline did exist. But it doesn't. So here we are. Daboll did great at Alabama. That is true. He was the offensive coordinator and led them to a national title. They won that national title when he was the offensive coordinator. He was great with the Bills. That's why he was sought after as a head coach. I am not totally opposed to the idea of you have to roll the dice. Let me finish with this as we approach an hour. You got to roll the dice, or else you're going to get back to 9. You're just going to get 9-3, 8-4, 9-3, 10-2. You got to roll the dice. Oh, well, there's all these cons. There's all these negatives with Brian Daboll or Brian Hartline. You're going to have to make some compromises. You're going to have to make some sacrifices somewhere. So choose the gamble correctly, because one way or another, you're making a sacrifice. You're making a compromise. There is good that Brian Daboll would bring. There is good that Brian Hartline would bring. You're going to have to compromise on something. In the offensive or in the coordinator, like I said, I default back to, well, Brian Hartline has no head coaching experience. Neither did Dan Lanning. Neither did Kirby Smart. Neither did Marcus Freeman. Neither did Ryan Day. And right now, the first-time head coaches are dominating college football. Those are objectively the 4 best programs right now. They're at the top. Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Ryan Day. And I know Day's been doing it for a while now, but I'm starting to lose my voice. Look at where Dan Lanning is with Oregon after a few seasons. There are going to be speed bumps. I am willing, and it would have been the same thing. Bob Chesney, same thing, is kind of even though he's been a head coach at Holy Cross and James Madison, and he's won everywhere he's been, but I also think of that as it's still a big jump for him, and I would group him with Brian Hartline and any of those guys previously as someone with a ton of upside, but he's never done it before. You have to be patient. I personally, if you want my 2 cents, and maybe Penn State fans for the most part won't agree, and I'm fine with that, I just need to see improvement. I am fine with a 5-7 season, a 6-6 season, 7-5 for probably the first couple of years. But I need to see progress. Are you gaining ground on the recruiting trail? Are you winning games that you're not supposed to? Basically, are you winning battles that you're not supposed to on the recruiting trail and in the actual games themselves? And tangible progress that continues to stack over time. And then when you get to year 3 and year 4, okay, year 3, are you in the mix? I don't need you to be at the top, but if you go 9-3 and you push a couple of those elite teams, okay, we got something here. We're seeing tangible progress, because it is going to take time for anybody. Brian Hartline's going to have to establish himself at Penn State. Bob Chesney would have had to have done the same thing. Terry Smith will have to establish himself. Even Jeff Brohm, who has been coaching for a while, great game day head coach, but he's still going to have to establish himself as a Penn State guy. You're going to have to be able, I'll tell you who's going to be the best at selling Penn State. It's Terry Smith. Everybody else, Hartline and staff, Hartline and company, Brohm and company, Daboll and company, they would have to learn how to market Penn State as a football program. Terry Smith actually has that as one of his better skill sets, and would, for obvious reasons, right? Terry Smith loves Penn State, so it's going to be easy for him to market. We're running out of answers here. It's the first prominent. I'm trying to figure out the way to phrase this, because all of these other coaches have quietly said no to Penn State. There hasn't been a situation. This is the first time we've seen something materialize and then go sideways. Because again, everybody else got the extension, or at least it was trending in the right direction. There was steam, there was momentum, but it never got to a point where it actually materialized. And that's why I think this one stings so much, because again, there were reports where 24/7 and On3 all had to put out a report saying Penn State, Kalani Sitake has emerged as Penn State's head coach. And well, BYU countered. I am personally glad that, well, there it is. 5 minutes ago, extended. Kalani Sitake has agreed to stay with the BYU Cougars. It's best for them. And it's best for Penn State. Objectively, I think Sitake is a great coach and a great person. I don't think it would have worked at Penn State long term. You might have your own version of Kalani Sitake sitting in the building as we speak right now with Terry Smith. You're not going to know until you try. You're not. All of them are risks. There are no safe. It wasn't. Did we think it was safe to fire James Franklin? Did Pat Kraft and Penn State think it was the safe move to fire James Franklin? No, they took a risk. Meaning that there is no safe hire. You are going to have to take a risk. If it doesn't work, you can fire them and try again. I know they want to avoid that situation at all costs. You're going to have to do it anyway. James Franklin did set the bar pretty high. Give him credit where credit's due. He won a lot of games. He just didn't win the ones that mattered the most. That's why you fired him. You made your bed. Now you got to lay in it. It was risky to fire James Franklin. It's going to be risky to hire somebody else. You know what you're dealing with. So make the move. Make a move. You're going to have to make a concession somewhere. I'm just repeating myself at this point. So that's where I'm going to have to finish up, because after an hour, I really don't have any other. The comments are, I see some of the good ones, but then I see a lot of the bad ones. Mike Tomlin. You guys are just messing. It's not time. This isn't time to be funny. Stop it. This is very serious. Penn State's in the middle of a coaching search after 50 days. Knock it off. No, really, I appreciate each and every one of you for joining me. Being active in the live chat too. Awesome to see your guys' feedback, for better or for worse. So thank you so much for joining me on this live show. Episodes daily as always. We are going to be talking about this coaching search all the way through, for better or for worse. Whatever the news is, whatever the rumors are, daily. If you are new to the channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. Right now, Penn State football is in the spotlight, but we'll talk about wrestling. We'll talk about basketball, and recruiting is also a deviation of football as well. So we'll talk about recruiting too, and we'll even get to some hockey here. But right now, since football is at the forefront, we don't know who the head coach is, so we'll continue to talk about it. But thank you for joining me on this live show. Episodes daily, like I said, so be on the lookout for them. Appreciate the support on the channel as always. My name is Zach Sako. I'm the host of Locked On Nittany Lions, and we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, also the #1 sports podcasting network out there.